Herb Baumeister is the Hamilton County businessman who committed suicide in 1996 after detectives dug up the remains of 7 men buried on his wooded estate. If investigators are right, Baumeister was a serial killer.
Many visitors to the property have the sense that the spirits of those killed here still linger.
There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock.
What's up? It's Tuesday again, and that means it's time for the latest episode of 13 o'clock, episode 82, to be specific.
82.
Yeah.
I know, man. They're piling up on us, aren't they?
I know. It just seems like, we finish one, and then I gotta do another one.
Yeah.
Well, especially since you started doing the movie reviews, too. It seems like I'm always working on one.
Yeah, the last movie review, people seemed to like that one. That one had a lot of fans.
Yeah.
Changeling.
Yeah, we did the Changeling. Well, like I said, that's kind of considered one of the best haunted house movies ever.
I think they're going to like the next one coming up, too.
We're not going to tell you what it is.
No. No. So what's the subject for today?
Well, today we're doing kind of like it's paranormal and it's true crime all in one.
Okay.
And this was actually a listener request, although, again, I don't remember who requested it because it was a really long time ago. But we're going to do Fox Hollow Farm.
Right.
Which actually, I had never heard of the serial killer that this is about until I saw the thing about the haunting at Fox Hollow Farm on Paranormal Witness.
Yeah, right.
Like several years ago. And then I had to go back and research the crime because I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, that was the first time it came to my attention also. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. What serial killer is this? And then, I didn't know about the case.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool that we found one right at the junction between the two subjects we usually cover. So yeah, we're going to do Fox Hollow Farm today. And I think it's basically a haunting at a serial killer's house. Yeah. Yeah. So it's cool. And I got really into this story and I've watched a shit ton of different documentaries on it and stuff. So we'll get into that in a bit. We already mentioned the movie review we did, which was The Changeling. So go back and check that out. That was our most recent one. And probably, I can do all the shout outs and shit like that at the end because I feel like we can just get into the topic. Well, first we're going to do our news story. Okay. Now, here's a news story that, I don't know, this really pissed me off a lot. I guess I figured since we're doing a show about a serial killer that was targeting gay men, I found this news story about this asshole judge. Well, he's a former judge now in Arkansas. Okay, it's already sounding good. And he was just sentenced to 5 years in prison because what he was doing, the bitch is 72 years old, right? Okay, all right. What he was doing was he was having these, men come in front of him, and it was minor shit. It was traffic violations, little drug possession kind of crap. Yeah. And he was saying, oh, well, I'll dismiss your case if you do, quote unquote, community service, which usually entailed, hey, why don't you come to my house, bring some canned goods to give to charity. That's part of your community service. Now take off your pants and bend over and let me take pictures of you and shit like that. He was doing that kind of shit. Dudes went along with that? Well, they wanted to get their charges dismissed. Okay. It's a lot of them were poor. They didn't really have, they didn't really want to pay the fine. They didn't want to do all this other stuff. So this old creep was having these poor people come in there for jaywalking or speeding or whatever, and having this old lech saying shit hey, well, let me take these pictures of you. So you can blackmail and shit. Now you foreigners know why Americans don't trust authority. We don't trust authority. We don't care what your job is. Because they're all weirdos like this. We don't care what your job is. You just can't be trusted. Yeah. This shithead's name is Joseph Beckman, by the way. And he's 72. And he actually pleaded guilty last year to charges of wire fraud and witness tampering. And they actually said they were only going to give him 3 years. Yeah. That's what the prosecutor wanted. He said, because, he's old and shit like that. I'm like, I don't give a shit how old he is. Right. He's a shithead. Yeah, fuck him. But they said no, 5 years. Oh, it turned out that he had done the same kind of shit before, back in the 1990s in a different county in Arkansas. But they didn't file any charges because he quit. Damn. So then they let him go be a judge somewhere else. Yeah. Maybe I don't know if they didn't check.
Oh, you didn't know being a judge was an old boy network?
Well, of course.
Well, you thought that was about
everything is.
Yeah, you thought that was like you thought that was about upholding the law and like being fair and shit like that. This is America. What are you talking about?
This is like out of this fucking horrible story. This guy looks like he's so punchable. Yeah. But I love the way
it's like the priesthood.
Yeah. So he's not in good health. I was like, poor baby. Actually, his attorney was trying to get him just sentenced to home detention because he's old and sick and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not going to go well. His lawyer made this quote. He called what the guy was doing. Mm-hmm. He quote unquote improperly mixed his personal desires with his job. Oh, is that what we're calling it now?
That's what we're going to call it, yeah.
That's what we're calling it
Yeah, I like that, man. I like that.
I'm like, okay, yeah. He's accepting full responsibility. We'll whip the shit for him. Yeah. Okay, so he's in jail.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I guess so. And it's like funny because
72 years old. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Yeah. Grown ass man.
He's like, and he's totally gross too. Yeah. I mean, not that it would have been any better if he was young and good looking. He's still been a creep, but you know what I mean. That somehow makes it worse. He looks like
these guys don't abuse any power over here. That's a myth. That's a myth. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's weird because they were investigating for something else. And then somebody said, "Hey, did you hear about all that weird shit he does, like with the guys that come in the court?" And they were like, "No, we didn't know about that. Tell us about that." And then this whole thing opened up. So Joseph Beckman, you suck. You're in jail now. Good.
Yeah. Do your time.
And I'm sure he probably won't live that long. But yeah, so I thought I would do another story about a horrible predator of men, since that's with the serial killer we're talking about today. So let's talk about the Fox Hollow Farm haunting. Now I want to talk about the haunting part first, because that's where I first heard about this case.
All right, that's how you want to do it.
Well, and plus the part about the serial killer is a lot more complicated, and I wanted to have a little bit more time to get into that.
It's a pretty cool case.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful property. I tell you that.
It really is. Yeah.
I know. If they came at me and said, "Hey, we I'll give you a good deal on the serial killer's house," and they showed it to me, I go, "Yeah, I'll take that.
All right, I can do
I'll live in that."
Well, apparently the people that were on it, because I think the Paranormal Witness episode, it was from season 2, which I'm not sure what year that was, but the people who own Fox Hollow Farm now, it's in Indiana.
Yeah.
And it's a huge, huge property. It's like 18 acres, 18 and a half acres, some shit like that. Now, the couple that were on Paranormal Witness, their names are Rob and Vicki Graves. And they moved to the property in 2006. Now, they come on the land. They're like, I guess they're pretty wealthy. I think she is a pathologist or some kind of, medical something like that.
Yeah, it's upper income housing.
It's a very, very large house.
You got to be somebody to own a house like this.
And
quote unquote be somebody.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Well, not like us nobodies that don't have any money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they moved to the property in 2006. Now they're going to look at the property. And they didn't know when they went to look at the property that this was a serial killer's house, because it had been quite a while. It had been like 10 years or more than 10 years since that had happened. And, they didn't really immediately remember. But when they were looking around the property, and Rob Graves said that, he's like, I started to think that this property was so beautiful, and it was like really, he called it a steal. It was like really reasonably priced, which, if you've seen the Amityville Horror or anything like that, he's like,
something's wrong here.
Something's the matter. Yeah. So then he was trying to remember, and he was like, oh, maybe this is the property where that serial killer lived like years and years ago. So he asked the realtor. Yeah. And the realtor was like, yeah.
Because, that's why you're getting such a good deal.
Yeah, that's why it's so cheap.
Yeah, it was funny. They're touring through the house, and the woman sees that they have a indoor pool. Yeah. And she's like, I didn't know you could have a pool inside your house.
Yeah, she's like, how cool is that? Yeah. And I was like, I liked her enthusiasm about that. Because that would be pretty rad. I mean, not when you find out what happened in there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but it's
that
was
his
feature.
killing field.
It was, yeah. So that was that. And then, so Rob Graves is like, at first, he's like, so I talked to Vicki about it, and I was like, now, are we going to be okay with this? Like, a serial killer lived here. There was bodies. It's like, it was a lot of people. And at first, she was kind of like, I don't know. That's kind of, she's like, I deal with, dead bodies. She's like, I work in a hospital all the time. So it wasn't so much that. She's like, but when it's your own house, it's a little weirder. So, but finally they were like, it's so pretty, and it's I mean, the place is just gorgeous. And like I said, there's pictures of it, because they did it on Ghost Adventures and shit too. And there's pictures of it all over the internet. It's just gorgeous. It's like a Tudor mansion, really, or mini mansion. And so they eventually decide to buy it. Now,
it's a mini mansion as opposed to a Mick mansion.
Or a maxi mansion.
Yeah. For those of you guys who don't live in the United States, what a Mick mansion is, it's god awful. It's kind of like a house that you pick out of a catalog, and you can mix and match whatever it is you think looks really classy in this big old mansion. They call them a Mick mansion. And some of the people that buy these things and build these things have no taste at all, okay? And some of these things, they just come out horrid. Just Google McMansion. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, because you have like a little menu of options that you can pick from, rather like a McDonald's.
Yeah, it's like out of a catalog.
Yeah, they're like, you can have this kind of feature, this kind of roof. You can have these colors. You can have this. You can have that.
Yeah, and you can tell some of these people picking these things out. This might be their first house. They've just come into money, and they're not really sure what a nice house. They're just like,
I would like one of each.
I want that one. I want that one. I want that one. I want that one. Oh yeah, and put that on there, and put a moat around it like a castle.
I was just gonna say.
And then like I want 2 lions on the outside. The house isn't that big, And
I want 40 gables.
Yeah, and I want a lighthouse over here. They're just fucking ridiculous, man. It's freaking ridiculous.
Now I want a lighthouse.
Yeah, and there's a couple of them like just up the street from us where the football player or the basketball players live.
Yeah.
And who that team bought a piece of property and put like 4 of them on there. And the houses are huge, but it's not on a big piece of property. It's weird, and you go. They don't look that bad though.
Yeah, those ones are actually not really an eyesore.
No, those ball players didn't order those. I think the team ordered those for them.
Most of the big ones, because we live in an area where there's kind of a lot of mansions or and smaller versions of it. Yeah, most of them are pretty okay looking. Yeah, they're not. A lot of them have like a Spanish influence, which I always thought was really pretty.
Just right here on our corner, the guy who owns Ace Hardware. He's the owner of Ace Hardware. His house is right there. I don't know if you know it, but it's a compound you can't even see in there. But yeah, McMansions.
Okay, so they move into this house, this really beautiful Tudor mansion. Now, the first thing that happened was kind of some minor, seemed like poltergeist activity. Vicki says that she was vacuuming some gravel up from around the indoor pool, which it's down in the basement, kind of. I mean, it looks like there's a sliding glass door that goes to the outside, but I think it's on the lower level of the house.
You talking about the pool? The pool?
Yeah.
The pool house has windows, though. You can see out.
Well, yeah, that's what I just said. Okay. It has a sliding glass door that goes out to that goes outside.
Because she said it was in the basement, but when they showed it, I was like, how is that the basement? That's not a basement.
I think she just meant it was the lower level.
It's like a lower level.
Or it could be, too, that the house might be on, like, several levels, like maybe the front of it. Yeah, maybe it's like a slope. That's what I was going to say.
Like that. But
so it might be that.
It's a cool-looking pool house.
But there is an outside entrance to the pool
I'd love
area.
to have something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind living there at all.
Yeah.
But, so she's vacuuming this gravel up from around the pool, and she said that the plug... that it kept coming unplugged,
right?
Like seemingly by itself. Now, the first time it happened, she was just like, "Oh, I must have just pulled it too hard and it came out of the extension cord or whatever." But she goes and plugs it back in, and then she's doing it again, and then it does it again, and then it does it again, and then at some point she plugs it back in, and then she turns around to look at it, and it like shoots out of the extension cord like by itself, like.
Okay.
And she's like,
so she
really,
okay.
Evidently.
Right.
Because that's what they showed on the reenactment, and she was talking about how startled she was about it. So that was the first thing that happened. A little bit after that, as I said, Rob Graves worked at a car dealership. And he had just hired another guy named Joe LeBlanc who worked there. He was like a salesman or something like that. And they kind of became buddies. So Joe is chronically late to work. Okay. And he's like, it's just because he's like, the traffic was always so bad. I lived almost an hour away and all this other stuff. So I was thinking about getting someplace closer so, I could get to work on time. So Rob Graves says to him, well, we have like an in-law apartment or house at Fox Hollow Farm. Why don't you come and live there? And then you can just come to work and it's not that far. So Joe does that. And they told him that, this was a serial killer's house. Yeah. He said we didn't get really into it because, like I said, it had been 10 years and the property had been totally renovated since then. Like they had pulled out all the old furniture and all the old, I don't know. He said pretty much everything from that time was gone. Yeah. So I guess it had been totally renovated in the decade since the crimes had occurred. So he wasn't really bothered by it. So he moves in.
I don't blame him. I would have moved in too.
Well, yeah.
Looking at the house.
Yeah, like I said, it's a gorgeous, and like I said, as far as I know, I don't know if Joe still lives in the apartment, but Rob and Vicki, I think, still live there. I
wouldn't care if that thing was haunted or not.
No, me either. I'm like, I'll put up with a lot of haunting for a house that nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You know,
for getting it that cheap.
I've already seen stuff like that, poltergeist, and which is different than a haunting. I know our regular listeners know my whole story and how I go into that. But I've been into a bad house. I've never been in a haunted house. But based on what they're describing, I could deal with that.
Yeah,
I could deal with that. It would scare me, and then afterwards, I was like, "Man, did you see that? God, that was something else." Wow, ghosts. Wow.
I mean, some of it I feel like would probably be really upsetting, like particularly the stuff that happened to Joe. But the other ones, they didn't have anything like threatening happen.
I would consider it kind of like a bonus of the house in a certain way, that it had like a bonus feature that at a random moment it just scared the shit out of you. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you just have to shake it back, like, okay, all right, back to normal life.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, I'm very skeptical about most ghost stories. This one I think is most likely out of them all, just because the background of the house, there's something kind of special about what happened to this house and what happened there. I kind of give these stories a little bit more weight than normal.
And they're not, they're
not real outrageous claims.
They do see apparitions and stuff, but it's not a shit ton of stuff.
No.
It's, it wasn't a lot of stuff that happened there that was on the show. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm very skeptical about ghosts in general, but if any place is haunted, it's probably this place.
Right.
Just,
And just because, we're kind of skeptical about ghost stories doesn't mean that we're saying that can't happen. I'm not a disbeliever in paranormal, neither is Jenny. I know that kind of stuff happens, and she's witnessed it too. It's just ghost phenomenon would have to be very rare. So that means I think most ghost stories are fabrications. But there's a chance, and I think probably some of the stories are true.
Yeah, they could be.
Yeah.
So after the vacuum thing happened, and then Rob LeBlanc moves into the apartment on the property. Now, the first thing that happens to him was kind of a weird dream that he had. He said as soon as he was done moving in, he was like really tired and he just kind of collapsed on his bed and fell asleep. And he's like, and then I started having this nightmare where I just felt like I had to run away, like that something was chasing me.
Yeah.
And apparently this nightmare was so vivid that he actually, it was almost like sleepwalking. Like he actually jumped out of his bed and started running across his apartment and slammed into his door frame, and he knocked a glass off a table and like cut his hand all up and all this other kind of stuff. So he said the dream was very upsetting. He wasn't sure what was chasing him, but he's like, he just felt like he needed to get out of the apartment because there was something really bad in there.
You see, that's another thing. Like, if ghosts exist, what is it? Is it a phenomenon where your psychic abilities, latent psychic abilities, are seeing the past? Is it actually like, would a ghost be the soul of a person come to warn you, and it's actually there? It is a conscious being, trying to come at you through another dimension? Nobody knows. I think there are a lot of different options. It's probably more than one kind of phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the next thing that happened is Rob's at home painting the outside of the house. Vicki comes home from work and she's like looking at it like, oh, that's a nice job you did and stuff like that. She says, then something off in the woods, caught my attention. She's like, and I look over there. She's like, and I see a guy in a red t-shirt. She's like, and he's standing over by the edge of the woods. Yeah. She's like, and his back was to me.
Yeah.
And he started slowly walking toward the woods. And she's like, and as he's walking, she's like, I realize that I can't see his legs.
It's just an upper body.
That it's just an upper body.
Yeah.
And she's like, and then I'm looking at him and then he just disappeared. She's like, now I'm a scientist, right? She's like, and I am super skeptical of this kind of stuff. And she's like, what the hell was that? You know what I mean? Now, so she says to Rob, she's like, I saw a guy. And so they go and look and stuff, and he's like, well, maybe it was, just a person. He's like, maybe it's one of those serial killer groupies that, like, hang out around the, because they know that Herb Baumeister lived here and stuff like that. And then they didn't really think much more about it. But Rob did install security cameras around the property because he thought that there was someone wandering around.
And unless I'm mistaken, where she saw that apparition is where they found the bones of those bodies.
That was later on.
That was later on?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's another creepy thing about this case, people. Those bones are still out there. They're still
a lot of them are still there.
They don't know how many people this dude killed.
Yeah.
One of the victims,
I'll get into that after the...
And they still find stuff there. Right.
Well, yeah, as far as I know, they're still finding stuff there to this day. I mean, it's a huge, huge property.
Yeah, and that property is basically a killing field and a cemetery, basically. An ad hoc body dump.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
It's a body dump.
So the next thing that happened, again, happened to Joe in his apartment. So he says he's in there, he's washing his dishes, and he hears a knock on the door. And he's kind of like, okay, I'm coming. And then he's like, it just kept knocking. And then he opens it, and no one's there. He's like, he goes outside, he looks around, there's nobody there. He's like, I don't know who that was that could have been knocking. He's like, and then he felt like someone was watching him. He's like, I just kept looking out all the windows and stuff, and he just had this creepy feeling that someone was watching him. And then a couple nights later, he said he'd been living there about 3 weeks at this point. He had a dog named Fred. He lived alone with, it was him and Fred up in the apartment. And he's like, I used to go out and, walk the dog up and down this big long driveway that they had. So he's walking Fred, and he thinks he hears something, like, in the woods. And he's like, and the dog heard it, too, because the ears pricked up, and he's, like, starting to growl. And then Fred takes off running, like, toward the woods. And he's like, where are you, come back here, boy. Yeah. Then he sees a man in a red shirt. The dog is chasing a man in a red t-shirt.
If this is true, then that means that a dog can see a ghost.
Yeah, well, some people say
it supports that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe saw him too.
Yeah.
He said he didn't see him at first. He just saw the dog take off running.
Yeah.
But then he saw the guy walking, and he said he walked into the woods and he kind of vanished.
Yeah.
So Joe is like freaking out because he thought it was a person. Like he didn't know if it was some guy that was like lurking around the property. Because he evidently at this stage, he didn't know that Vicki had also seen a guy in a red t-shirt wandering around. So this is the first time that he's seen him.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that a dog or an animal can see a ghost.
Yeah.
Evidently, based on this story. That means it's not happening within the human mind. That's what I'm saying. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so he runs into the woods. So he said he was really scared because he didn't know if it was a real person or not. But he's like, I had to run in there and get my dog back. So he runs in the woods, and apparently he sees the guy, like, and he looks him right in the face.
Right.
And that, like, freaked him the hell out. Now, he told Vicki about this the next day. He said, and he showed her, he's like, I saw him and he's like walking with purpose, like toward the woods, and he had a red t-shirt, and Vicki was like, holy shit, I saw that too.
Right.
Like right around the same area.
Yeah.
Then they kind of knows like, okay, what the hell is going on? Is this a person who's hanging around our property or what? And then I'm guessing this was either the next night or a couple nights later, something like that. Joe is sleeping. It's like the middle of the night. Then someone starts banging on his door.
Yeah, this is a pretty creepy episode right here.
Yeah.
This story. And the way this guy tells this story, he's credible.
Yeah.
Sounds like it really happened to him. You know what I mean? The way he carries himself.
So he's woken up in the middle of the night by this insistent banging on his door, and he keeps yelling out like, "Who is that? Who is that?" But no one would answer. He's like, and the banging just gets more violent and violent, and he's like, and he's touching the door, and he's like, you can feel the door like vibrating.
Yeah.
From the like knocks are so hard.
Yeah.
And then finally he whips the door open, and there's no one there.
Yeah.
But here's the creepiest detail. The knocker on the door is sitting horizontal, like someone was holding it
at a 90-degree angle.
At a 90-degree angle, and then it drops back down and knocks one more time. Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's the same knocker because I saw on Ghost Adventures, they do actually have a knocker. It's actually kind of a creepy looking door knocker. It's like it's a long silver horse head, like with a knocker thing over it. They didn't show it like that on Paranormal Witness, but that's what it really looks like. Yeah, he's like that was really freaky, like that really scared him to death because he opened it. He's like there was nobody there. And
before I forget, I think one of the best programs on this case is actually the Paranormal Witness one, and you can see that for free on Daily Motion. Yeah, under Fox Hollow Farm.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of good stuff about this case on YouTube where some of these paranormal investigators, some of them are small channels too, have gone to this place and done investigations. Now, we didn't really have time to watch them all. There's a lot of them. And some of those things are like 3 or 4 hours long.
Yeah.
But, if you want to know more about this case after we get done with the show, you can go check it out yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of guys have been to this place.
We watched the Paranormal Witness about it. I watched the Ghost Adventures episode about it, which, wasn't really all that great. Yeah. And there's actually quite a long documentary called The Haunting of Fox Hollow Farm. That's available for free on YouTube. I watched part of that. That's mostly about one investigation, although it's a lot of the paranormal investigators talking to the house's owners and talking about the history of it and stuff like that. I didn't really watch too much of the investigation because it didn't seem like not a lot happened.
Right.
Just like the Ghost Adventures show, I think on the Ghost Adventures show, pretty much the only thing that happened was they were in Joe's apartment and they were like, oh, look, that looks like a wisp of something, which I didn't even see. It didn't look like anything. And then they were like, one of the guys was in there and there was like a knock, like the knocker sounded like the knocker did twice, but they didn't have the camera on it. So that could have been anything.
Yeah. Ghost is not going to be reliable. It's not going to perform on camera.
Yeah. So I think that was the only thing.
It's going to be some kind of spontaneous phenomenon that only happens maybe once every couple of months. It's going to be something like that.
Yeah. So after this whole thing and Joe opened the door and there was nobody there. So then he closes it up again and locks it. And then the dog starts to growl. And then he said he saw the doorknob turning. And he's like, I could see it turning. I could hear it turning.
Man, I would freak.
Well, he seemed like he was... I don't blame the dude. I mean, like, he was fucking terrified, right? Yeah. The dog's growling at the door. He's like,
I'd be grabbing all the guns if I thought something was coming in on me like that.
And then all of a sudden he says the door flew open.
Yeah.
He's like, and it hit the wall, like on the inside, and he's like, wood chips flew in.
Yeah.
And he's like wigging out, like he's running outside going, who is that? What the hell is going on? And then he turns around and sees a guy in his apartment. Yeah. He's like the guy. Now, I don't think he said this on Paranormal Witness, but I think I read something else that he talked about where he talked about this experience. But he said this guy was wet. Yeah. And he said, and he looked terrified.
Well, he's portrayed as wet and terrified in Paranormal Witness.
Yeah, he didn't. I'm just saying he didn't say that. They did reenact it like that.
Like he'd gotten out of the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, they said there's just look of terror on his face and he was like screaming and, you know, he was like running through the apartment.
Yeah, which kind of like leads you to believe that at least some of these ghosts are the ghosts of terrified victims trying to escape. There's at least one of them. All right.
So that's actually what they think ended up happening because since then he ended up telling Rob and Vicki about that and, you know, Vicki had seen the red-shirted man too. So they said, maybe we should investigate this case a little bit because they said we'd heard about it, but, you know, it happened like 10 years ago. We just remembered vaguely hearing about it on the news or whatever. So they actually called the local news station and the news station gave them some footage like from the time. Mm-hmm. And they had a bunch of pictures of the victims that have been identified, which is not very many. And I'm going to get to that in a bit. But one of the victims that came up, Joe said, that's him. That's the guy that I saw in my apartment.
He identified him.
So he identified him from that. And apparently he had never seen that guy before. He just recognized him when he saw the picture. He's like, that's the guy that I saw in my apartment.
That's pretty creepy.
Yeah, that is pretty creepy. Then the next thing that happened, this kind of thing is where maybe you wouldn't want to live there because... So Joe invites his friend Jeremy over to the house, and Joe and Jeremy are swimming in the pool along with Rob and Vicki's two sons. They had like two teenage sons. So they're all swimming in the pool, having a good time. I think he said they were like picking dead beetles off the bottom of the pool or something like that, just, you know, farting around. And he says suddenly he swam to the edge of the pool to put like a beetle on the side, and he felt something touch his back or touch the back of his neck. Yeah. And he turns around like thinking it was one of the other guys. He's like, no, they were all on the other end of the pool, so it wasn't them. Mm-hmm. He's like, so then he starts swimming back to them, and he's like, I distinctly felt two hands grasping me around the neck and like trying to choke him. Yeah. And his friend Jeremy was on the show too, and Jeremy was saying, you know, we didn't really know what was going on because all of a sudden he was in the pool and he just had his hands up to his neck. Like he said, and he looked terrified. Yeah. And he so he just like jumps out of the pool and tells all of them, just get out of the pool. You know, there's something bad in there.
I think we got to tell him what this guy's mode of operation was, is how he killed
people. Well, I'll get to that in the last part because that, you know, then that'll tie back in.
It'll tie into that, right?
Yeah. And then the next thing that happened, a lot of this shit happened to Joe, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, Rob and Vicki did report, like I said, I've seen some other ghost hunter type shows that have them on it. And they said they still hear noises and see things every now and then, too. But a lot of the stuff that was on Paranormal Witness was actually reported by Joe in his apartment. And then the next thing that happened to him, he's like, I was sitting in the apartment one night, like on my computer or whatever. And he's like, and I hear this weird metallic scraping sound, like coming from the kitchen. He's like, so I go over there and I see that all the knives have come out of the butcher block and they're all laying in the sink. Wow. then he looks up at the wall and there's like knife marks all over the wall that I evidently were not there before. I'm not sure.
That's pretty impressive because
that's some similar shit to what happened in your case. A little bit.
That's why I'm bringing that up. It's in ghost cases or reports of ghosts. It's rare that objects move. Moving objects usually takes place in poltergeist phenomena, which is RSPK, really. It's more like, instead of spirits of the dead, poltergeist really, in the classic sense of the word, is a situation more kind of like what you saw in the movie Carrie. It seems to be unconscious psychokinesis of a pissed off person. So, to find a ghost that has the strength or the power to move objects, especially, heavy objects, it's rare. So it's significant, I would say, in the case.
Yeah. So he sees these knife marks all over the wall. And then he says, he's like, maybe somebody got murdered in this apartment.
Yeah.
Because they're not really sure. Like I said, they don't know how many people this serial killer killed. They don't know where he did it. They think it was mostly around the pool area, but they're not entirely certain of that. So it's entirely possible that someone might have been murdered in this apartment. Who knows?
Right.
So he decides, he's like, I've seen all the ghost hunter shows and they do EVPs and shit like that. So he's like, well, I'm going to try that out. So he specifically said, I unplugged everything. He's like, I unplugged the fridge. I turned off the fans. I turned off everything that could make noise. So he's like, and then I turned on my voice recorder on my phone. And he's like, I kind of felt stupid doing it because I'm just like talking in the dark. But he's like asking, is there anyone here with us? All this other kind of stuff. And as he's talking, then the dog starts growling as though someone's in there. And he said he kind of felt like someone was in there. Now, when he listened to the recording back, and they did actually play the actual recording on Paranormal Witness, because they will do that. A haunting won't. They usually, that's all reenactment. But Paranormal Witness, if you have any real audio or photos, they generally will show that. So they did play the audio. It's definitely sounds like a man's voice. He said he thought it said, because he was saying who's with us or who's in here. And he said it sounded like it said the married one.
Right.
Which it kind of sounds like that. It for sure sounds like a voice. Like it doesn't just sound like most EVPs to me just sound like. Right. But this actually did sound like someone talking. I'm not sure if that's what it said. It did kind of sound like that. Now, he thought that was kind of weird because he's like, all of Herb Baumeister's victims, as far as they know, were single gay men. Mm-hmm. So he's like, the only one that was married was Herb, the murderer.
Right.
So he's like, hopefully, he's like, I don't know. He's like, so hopefully it's not fucking the ghost of Herb hanging around in this fucking apartment, because that would be pretty freaky. However, if this experience that he had in the pool with feeling hands around his neck and stuff like that is true, then that was probably Herb too. So
Herb.
It wouldn't be so bad if it was just like the ghosts of the victims, I mean, that would be creepy enough, but at least they're not, actively trying to hurt you. So so it would seem, and he does actually seem to think that the serial killer's ghost is hanging around on the property too.
Oh, Herb.
Yeah.
What's so funny is that you hear the name Herb and then you see the picture and he just does. He looks like a creepy old pervy closeted gay dude that kills people. I think he just looks like that.
He is very weird looking.
Yeah, and evidently the guys that knew him said he was skeevy. That he was skeevy. He was kind of dirty.
Well, his house was dirty. He wasn't particularly dirty.
Okay.
So that was pretty much what happened on the Paranormal Witness episode. As I said, I'm pretty sure the Graves still live there. Rob and Vicki, I think. When they did Ghost Adventures, they were still there. Every other paranormal show I saw, they were still there. They do let paranormal teams in periodically to investigate if they want to. So evidently the haunting is not so bad that that it makes it unlivable.
Yeah. I'd live there,
I would too. I mean, it would be freaky if someone, like, you thought someone was strangling your ass in the pool, but,
Yeah.
But if it only happened, like, once in a while, maybe, maybe once a year, it
would give you something to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I guess.
What's weird is just what's out in those woods. I never know when you're going to find a bone.
Well, and they did. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah. They said, Rob and Vicki and Joe, where they saw right around the area where they saw the red-shirted guy, they found a human femur.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of it. They called the cops and everything. Because there's still, like I said, there's still bones all over the property.
Yeah, some people might be upset about that, but, spending a lot of time in the country and knowing the wild and nature, you go to any one of these little forests and little sets of woods that we have around here. Those are dump sites. Those are body dump sites for all kinds of creatures.
Yeah.
Just filled with dead squirrels and rabbits, and just creatures die. It's full of bones out there. But in this place, some of them happen to be humans.
But yeah, and actually on some of the other paranormal shows that I saw that were more recent than this, Rob and Vicki did say, yeah, we still do periodically find human bones on the property. And actually a little bit on the neighbor's property, too.
If you take a nice walk out through those beautiful woods, there's bones of dead animals everywhere.
Well, yeah.
Everything dies everywhere. Every house is built on a bunch of built on a bunch of bones, too. Animal bones.
Well, yeah.
Some of them human bones. You never can't tell what happened.
Death is everywhere.
Yeah. That's one of the things, yeah. There are flies on the windscreen.
I don't know why I just thought of that.
It's just everywhere.
Yeah,
it's part of nature.
So, so that was the Paranormal Witness episode. Like I said, it's available on Daily Motion. A couple people have put it up. It's actually one of the better episodes, I thought.
Yeah, this is one of the, like I said, I think this is one of the more credible haunted house stories.
Yeah, like I said, they did see a lot of apparitions, but they didn't have any super crazy. Yeah. And they seemed pretty level-headed.
Yeah. Yeah, something actually did happen at this location, and the claims are not real outrageous. Yeah. It's just the basic reports of, apparitions.
Yeah.
Apparitions and hearing things, and, this is a likely spot, That's, if there are haunted houses, this would be one of them.
Like I said, it would be a very good candidate.
Be a good candidate, yeah.
So we're about at the halfway mark now. Yeah. So when we come back, I actually want to talk about the serial killer in question and the shit that happened on this farm.
Yeah.
A decade before Rob and Vicki moved in there.
That's going to be pretty interesting to have to show.
This is a pretty creepy case.
Yeah, old Herb.
And like I said, this is the first time I'd ever heard of him was on this Paranormal Witness episode. Yeah. So I decided to go back and look him up. So we're going to take a break and we'll be back in just a minute. All right, so let's talk about Herbert Baumeister.
Yeah, old Herb.
Now, we say serial killer. Technically, I guess he's only an alleged serial killer because he died before he could be arrested or charged with any of the crimes that he is suspected of committing. But let's be honest here. I'm pretty sure he did this shit.
He didn't want to face the music.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, this guy is, seems like kind of a weird dude. Now, from all accounts, his family were, his parents were kind of well off. His dad was a doctor and stuff like that. He had a pretty normal childhood. His wife called it a beaver cleaver upbringing. It was a very normal childhood. Now, evidently, when he got into his teenage years, he started acting different. They said he became very volatile, very belligerent. He was clearly very intelligent, but he started to get to a point where he really didn't have an idea of what was appropriate behavior anymore, and he got into a lot of trouble. Now, evidently, he was diagnosed with, most sources say schizophrenia. A couple sources I read said something different, but it was similar to that. So he had some kind of mental illness, which seems to have developed sometime in his teenage years.
It's so funny. I'm sitting over here just going, yeah, come on. I'm starting to feel like I'm Flavor Flav. I'm like your hype man. I don't need to be wearing like a big clock around my neck. Going, yeah, come on. Yeah. Yeah, come on.
You'll always be my Flavor Flav. I'm totally buying you.
About the same size. About the same size. You know? I'm like your hype man.
I'm going to buy you a big clock.
Yeah, come on.
It'll be like half as big as you. That would be really funny.
See, I just did it again. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I do that. Because usually when you're talking... Well, because when you're talking, if you kind of go off on a tangent or something like that, then I don't want it to make it seem like I'm not listening.
Yeah, well, I'm helping you.
Yeah, so every now and then I say, yeah, which, you know, I know it's annoying. Like, I try to take it out sometimes when I edit.
Flav.
Yeah.
Just call me Flav.
And I just did it again.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So anyway.
Back to the show, people.
Yeah. So apparently he had some kind of mental illness. Like he started carrying dead animals around his pockets. Like he would pee on his teacher's desk. Shit like that.
Oh, yeah. Shit a boy does, I guess.
Damn. Now, he went to Indiana University. Initially, he was going to study anatomy. I don't know if he wanted it or if his parents wanted it. He was thinking about being a doctor, but he didn't last very long. He dropped out. And then his dad got him a series of, you know, kind of lower end jobs. I think his first job was at the Indianapolis Star, I think was the newspaper. He was like a copy boy, which, you know, that's just a guy that's like a desk runner.
So Herb didn't go to college, really?
No, he dropped out.
Silver spoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he was evidently very smart.
Yeah.
He just seemed like a weirdo. You know
how it is here in the United States, especially during that era, though. If you didn't have that piece of paper, that was kind of like your permission to make money and to have a job.
Yeah, so he started out as a copy boy. They said the weird thing about him in that position, because this was kind of his, you know, the first job that he had. And like I said, his dad kind of pulled some strings and got it for him.
Yeah.
They said that he would show up every day, like even though it was kind of like a lower level job and stuff, he would show up every day like immaculately dressed, and he was very eager to please, to the point where people found it off-putting.
Yeah, he didn't know how to act.
Yeah, like
he sounds like he's slightly autistic.
Maybe, but like I said,
like Asperger's, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it might have been something like that, but he definitely seemed to have a problem acting right.
Right.
And he seemed to, like, people seemed to respond to that in him. Like, they thought that he was playing a role, or they just found him very weird or, like, hard to relate to. So, like I said, I think a lot of people at the newspaper where he worked thought he was very overeager. He was always kind of fishing for compliments, like trying to get recognition and stuff like that. And I think people didn't really like that, and they thought he was a weirdo. So, like, then he went on to another job, which I think was at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. And they said now at that job, people there said that he was like the opposite. Like, he was like super bossy and like acting like a dick all the time. Like this must be what I'm supposed to do. Right. So people didn't like him then either. Yeah. Now, even back then, and this was the early 70s, apparently some of his coworkers thought he was a nut, and also that he was a closet case.
Okay.
So people were recognizing that.
Yeah, we have to clarify, maybe, you know, some people in England or UK, a closet case is actually kind of like a gay guy who's trying to keep it under wraps. Keeping it under wraps.
Yeah, who's trying to deny it. Which probably, I mean, a lot of people did, I guess, back in the 70s. Days, and he was very conservative. Yeah. His family were very, very conservative. He actually met his wife, Juliana, when they were both in the Young Republicans at Indiana University. Because like I said, he went for one semester and then he dropped out. And I think he went back for a little while later, but I don't think he ever finished. Yeah.
What's funny is, you know, about closeted guys. Toby's a friend of ours. He's one of the coolest leather daddies you'd ever meet. One time Toby said, man, you know, never mess with those closeted. You know, he says they're weird. That's what he said.
Well, this guy was definitely weird.
Right. You know, I guess, you know, you have a guy who, you know, he doesn't feel good about being gay, but he's gay. You know, he's trying to keep it under wraps. It makes a lot of internal conflicts.
Well, yeah, and I think
a lot of mental problems.
Well, yeah, I think that's what messes a lot of people up.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that's why it's so much better now, because it's like you can be gay and it's fine and no one cares.
Yeah.
You know, maybe back in the 70s, it was still like a huge stigma attached to it. And especially for someone like him, like I said, who was he seemed not nerdy. It's hard to describe him. Like I've seen some documentaries, because there's been a ton of documentaries done about this guy. They had one with that Bill Curtis fella, Secret Life of a Serial Killer. Crime Stories did a show about him. Behind Mansion Walls did a segment on him. You know, it's like rich people that kill people. But he definitely seemed warped, you know, very warped. It's weird because when you see these videos, like they showed like a Christmas video of him and his family and stuff like that, he just, I don't know, he comes across like super creepy.
It's not healthy. My advice to you, if you're out there, if you're gay, be gay.
Well, yeah, like I said,
be power gay, man.
Well, the thing is, like I said, nowadays you need permission. It's like nobody gives a shit, and I think that's so much better. Like I think people are much more mentally healthy because of that. Because you can just
nobody gives a shit.
Because you can just be how you want, and no one's gonna get up your ass about it.
Yeah,
or anything like that. So he ends up meeting this woman, Juliana. Like I said, they were both, you know, they went to college like during the hippie era, and they were kind of like, well, we were in the Young Republicans Club, and we were, you know, they seemed kind of square, and and they were all like, oh, they wanted a family and all this other kind of shit. So they evidently kind of hit it off. Now, about 6 months after they got married, Herb's dad had him committed to a mental hospital.
Yeah.
So apparently he was having some problems.
Right.
He was in there for 2 months, and then he got out. Now, eventually, Herb and his wife had 3 kids. And by all accounts, he was a really good dad. Like, the kids loved him. He spent a lot of time with them. And now, I don't know if this is true. This is on one of the documentaries I saw about him. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was like a friend of the wife or something. And she said that the wife had told her that her and Herb had only had sex 6 times.
Damn, that's some weird shit.
Like in the whole time that I was like, well, 3 of those must have had, because I mean, she had 3 kids, so you know.
Right.
So I'm like, so the other 3 times were just.
Well, if that's true, he just married her for looks. That was what he's called, his mustache. Or his beard.
His mustache.
Yeah, that shows you how much I know about gay. I don't know that much about gay.
His mustache.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is pretty
His
funny.
mustache.
Yeah.
His tash.
His tash.
His tash.
Yeah, go watch Shitcase Cinema. You guys.
If you guys don't know who Johnny Shitcase is, go watch Shitcase Cinema.
On YouTube.
It's the most hilarious.
He's this dude from...
This British dude.
He's from Yorkshire.
He's fucking awesome. I mean, you can't...
And he reviews just like shitty Grade Z movies.
Yeah. And you never can really tell what he's gonna get, what he's gonna give as a rating.
I really do love that guy.
Yeah.
He is funny as hell.
He's been doing it for 10 years, and Johnny Shitcase, if you're out there, bro, you the man.
He is very funny. We'll sit there and like just like
binge
let his
watch
show, just binge watch his
Shitcase Theater.
Oh my god, he's so funny. Yeah, Shitcase Cinema.
Shitcase Cinema, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Okay, so. Like I said, Herb and Julie, they had, they have 3 kids. Now, at some point, he gets a job at a thrift store. And even though he at first kind of thinks the job is quote unquote beneath him, because he was one of those, he actually starts to think, hey, thrift store, maybe this might be a good business. So he spent 3 years working there, learning the business and stuff like that. And then he borrowed some money from his mom and opened up his own thrift store, like a big one. Him and Juliana opened up their own thrift store. And it's called Save-A-Lot. Nothing to do with the grocery store chain called Save-A-Lot. I don't know, I don't know if you guys have those where you are, but we have them here in Florida. And it might not be a national chain. I don't know. This wasn't that. This was Save, S-A-V a lot, not with an E. You know what I mean?
This kind of trips me out. Imagine you're in these stores. You know what I mean? You're like in a Dollar General store. You're in this little bit, and that store is owned by a serial killer. Imagine that. You never. You never know.
Yeah.
You would never know.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience because I'm sure a lot of people shopped at that store and they didn't know it was owned by a serial. They just thought, oh, it's that nice couple, that owned that store. So evidently the store did pretty well. At this point, I think it was 1992, they were making a lot of money and their kids were in private school and stuff. And they decided, well, we want a big property that's like kind of out of the way, like away from the city and stuff. So they purchase Fox Hollow Farm. Now, this is an idyllic existence, you know, they have the kids are running around in the yard, and they said it's wonderful. It's this whole, you know, she's waxing philosophical about how awesome it is, and on the one documentary I saw. Now, an interesting thing that, and I forgot to mention this before, and this is something that's not really mentioned on a lot of documentaries about him. I only saw this on some really kind of intricate write-up about his life. Evidently, he'd been arrested before, once for drunk driving and a hit and run. He actually, I think he got off on that. And he also was charged with stealing a friend's car and conspiracy to commit theft. But he beat those charges.
Right.
So he had a little bit of a record.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be mentioned on a lot of the stuff.
It's just funny how a guy like this could get a big house like that. I need a big house like that.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He just kind of weaseled his way into it.
Well, no, I mean, he did open the business.
But I think he did that with his dad's money, didn't he?
His mom's money.
His mom's money, yeah.
He borrowed some money from his mom.
Nowadays, you couldn't own a store and make that amount of money to buy a house like that.
Yeah, because I believe in 1992 they paid $1 million for that shit.
Yeah, it is out in the middle of nowhere. But it was in a wealthy area.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a...
Westfield, Indiana. Yeah. It's actually, I think it's about 20 miles north of Indianapolis.
Yeah, there's
and it's it's a really nice area. It's horse farms, mansions, all that kind of shit. So in 1994, one of the Baumeister's children is playing in the woods like they do. I think it was the son. I think his name was Eric. He was 13. And he finds, lo and behold, a human skull.
Yeah, like you do. Sometimes you're out there and you just find a head.
Right.
On your own property.
So, so he goes to his mom and he's like, you know, hey, I found a skull out in the yard.
Did he have it with him, do you know, or did he leave it out there?
I think he left it out there and had her come and look at it. Like, I don't think he picked it up and was like, hey. So, yeah, they went out there and she's like, that's odd.
Right, yeah.
Did she report it to the police? No. She asks Herb when he gets home from work, why is there a skull in our backyard?
Yeah, really. Like he would know.
Yeah. Well, no, he gives her this bullshit answer.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, his dad was a doctor, an anesthesiologist, I think. Oh, and that was my dad's, one of his lab skeletons. Right. And it was in the garage and, you know, maybe, you know, an animal like dragged it out of the garage, something like that. And she bought it. Yeah. She was like, oh, yeah, I suppose so. Right. No offense, but I watched a documentary, the one with Bill Curtis, I think, had a kind of extensive interview with Juliana. And I think this was many years ago. But I don't think she knew that her husband was a serial killer.
She's pretty gullible, though.
But she doesn't seem like the brightest bulb. Right. I'm just saying. Yeah. Like, the weird thing is that she said when they found the skull, she's like, she first said head, and then she said skull or whatever, round thing. And I was like, what? What are you talking about?
Could be that it was the skull, but the face wasn't attached to the skull, so it might have just been
It looked like a whole skull.
Did they show the actual one?
No, they showed like a reenactment. But but then later on, like on the same show, I think they said that it was a whole skeleton. Okay. But most of the stuff said it was just a skull. So
she believed what he said because that's what she wanted to believe. She didn't want to lose that house.
Yeah, I suppose so. And, you know, like I said, they had quote-unquote perfect life. Even though, I mean, from the outside it seemed perfect. But later on when everything came out, it actually ended up that they had been fighting and had separated many times, you know, leading up to the final. Yeah. And actually, I believe even before they moved to Fox Hollow Farm, he had actually filed for divorce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't have sex. Why
But evidently,
would you want to be married?
Yeah, but evidently they reconciled later and stuff like that. So it wasn't as idyllic a situation as it initially appeared. Yeah. So yeah, skull, and she doesn't say anything. Now, meanwhile, in Indianapolis, in the gay community, several men have gone missing. Right. Particularly now, Indianapolis, I'm not sure, the Bill Curtis documentary said that, and I guess this was at the time this was happening, which was in the early 90s. They're like, you know, Indiana in general and Indianapolis, even though it's a big city, are very, very conservative. It's a very red state. They're like, so even back in the 90s, crimes that had gay men as victims were not really particularly cared about. And the sad thing was that when these men started to go missing, the media didn't really report it. They said the gay papers picked it up and started writing stories about it, and they would actually circulate flyers like in the nightclubs to try and figure out what was going on, because it really didn't seem like the police gave much of a shit. So there had been a few disappearances, And really, it didn't come to the police's attention until one of the vanished men's mother, I think his name was Alan Broussard, and she went to the police and said that her son was missing. She he went out to the club to meet his boyfriend, and he never came back, and that's not like him. Now, she reported him missing the next day, but apparently in Indiana, and I don't know if it's still like this now, they won't do a full investigation on a missing person of an adult for 30 days.
It's ridiculous.
I'm like, really? And I mean, they had this woman on there and she was saying, well, this is the United States. And if you're an adult and you want to disappear, then you have every right to do that. She's like, unless there's obvious signs that something bad happened, like there's blood all over your apartment. They're like, so they didn't investigate it. So the mom was like, okay, well, I don't like this. So she went to a private investigator. Right. Virgil Vandegrift. Now, he used to be a cop, so now he's a private investigator. Now, weirdly, about a week later, he gets another call from another mother and says, my son is also missing. And he also hung out at the same bars and stuff like that downtown. Yeah. So all these guys are going missing. Now, they really have no idea what's going on at this stage. There are no bodies, there are no nothing. But they start to suspect, this particular investigator he's like, this has got to be a serial killer because most of the men that are missing, he's like, they're about the same type. They're about the same height, about the same weight, same hair color, same appearance type thing. And they hang out at the same bars. So he's like, I feel like someone is targeting them specifically.
Yeah, this can't be a big gay community. I mean, we're not talking about Fire Island or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's a big city, but, and so you kind of get, they said that, a lot of gay men would come there, like especially if they were born in like rural communities and stuff. And so they're converging there.
Yeah. So, so there was, actually they said at the time there were 12 gay nightclubs in Indianapolis and 3 gay papers, like gay specific newspapers.
That's actually a bigger scene than I thought.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that was at the time.
All around the state.
Yeah, I think, they were.
Spend the weekend and that kind of stuff.
Right. Now, really, the only clue they have at this point is that one of the men who was missing, and this was one of the guys whose mothers had come and reported him, someone had seen him getting into a car that had Ohio plates on it. And that's about all they know. And at this point, the private investigator is working with the editor of some of the gay magazines, the gay newspapers in the city, trying to coordinate and trying to, putting up flyers in all the clubs and trying to figure out what's going on. Then 2 things kind of happen simultaneously. Now, they're kind of thinking, there was actually one detective, I think her name was Mary Wilson, and she got interested in the case, so she kind of wanted to look into it. And so she's working with Vandegrift. And while they're investigating, they find out that there's another case that's going on in Ohio. Now, in Ohio, starting in 1989, there had been a bunch of bodies of men found on the road between Indianapolis, like the interstate between Indianapolis and Columbus, Ohio. And they called these the I-70 murders. And they figured that this was probably a serial killer too. And they said, now, interestingly, a lot of those victims were also were from Indianapolis and were associated with the gay community in Indianapolis. So there was so maybe there's a connection here. Now, at this point, a man comes forward and he says, I have a very interesting story for you. I was at this bar and he's like, and I saw this guy in this club and he was looking at one of the missing posters and there was just something really weird about him. And he's like, and I kind of got the idea that he maybe knew something about it. So he kind of wants to see what's going on with this guy. Mm-hmm. So he goes home with the guy. Mm-hmm. The guy said his name was Brian Smart. And he said that he was a landscaper. And he's like, I'm going to take you to the house where I'm working right now. He didn't say it was his house. He said it was employer's house. And he was staying there because he was doing a job. He said there's an indoor pool and there's a bar by it. And it's really nice. We'll party and stuff like that. And the guy's like, okay. Yeah. So he goes to the guy's house. Now, he doesn't know. He tells the police, he's like, I'm not sure where the house is. He's like, it was about a 20-mile drive. It was north. I know that. He's like, but it was dark out. I'm not real familiar with that area. But he said it was a real rich area, lots of horse farms. He said the house was a Tudor mansion. Yeah. He said it had a really, really long curving driveway. And he's like, and there was a split rail fence in the front. And there was a sign that said farm something or something farm. But he couldn't remember the name, but he hadn't really seen it. So he says they get to the house. He's like, they go into the pool area. He's like, and it was really weird because there was all these mannequins, like in all these different outfits, like all around the pool. Yeah. And he thought that was pretty weird. And he's like, there was even one at the bar, like they were all dressed in different costumes and stuff. And he said, what's with all the mannequins? And quote unquote, Brian Smart says, oh, the owner has them here because he's lonely or he likes to feel like there's people here. And I was like, okay.
That's some weird shit.
So then this person says, oh, well, do you want a drink? And this guy wisely says, no, thank you.
Right, yeah.
And then he's like, oh, well, I'm kind of into autoerotic asphyxiation. Do you know what that is and stuff? And then Herb Baumeister is who this guy is, even though he said he was Brian Smart. He asks this guy, he's usually given a pseudonym, Tony Harris usually, but on one of the documentaries, they identified him as Mark Goodyear. I don't know if that's actually his real name because they only showed him in shadow. So Herb asks Mark, will you strangle me? And so he's like, okay. So he does it. And then Herb kind of passes out and he's like, wow, it's this big rush and everything like that. He's like, can I do it to you now? And he's like, okay.
Right.
So then he does it. And then this guy realizes he's not going to stop. Right. He's just going to kill me. So thinking very quickly, I have to say, because I admired how his quick thinking here, he pretends to pass out.
Right.
And then Herb lets go of him, and then he wakes back up, and Herb's like, oh, yeah, my bad, sorry, all this other kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
So then Mark gets the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Now he reports
Did he do it with his hands or was he doing it with a...
Some of them showed with the hands and some of it showed with like a pool hose.
Yeah, garden hose.
I thought or like a garden hose.
Yeah.
I've seen two versions.
Right.
So I'm not real sure. Okay, so he reports this to the police. And he says, I feel really bad. I can't remember exactly where the house is, but he described it as well as he could. Vandegrift and the detective, they kind of drive out around that area looking for it, but they can't find anything. So there the case stagnates for about a year. And then they get a lucky break because it seems that Mark Goodyear / Tony Harris, whatever his real name is, he's at a bar one night in Indianapolis. And he sees this guy again. Like, he hasn't seen him for like a year. I guess he's been keeping a low profile. So he's like, well, okay, well, I don't want him to see me.
Right.
So he kind of hides and he tells his friend, hey, go follow that guy and get his license plate number.
Yeah.
So the guy does that. They get his plate number. They report the plate number to the police. And the car is registered to Herb Baumeister.
Oh, Herb.
Old Herb. Now, at this stage, the police do not know that there's been a skull found in the backyard of this house. All they know is that this guy has been seen at these particular bars and that he might be associated with some of the missing people. So the detective on the case, Mary Wilson, she decides, okay, well, I'm just going to straight up go to his place of business and confront him about it. So she goes to Save-A-Lot and she says, so what do you know about all these people missing from gay bars down in Indianapolis? She called him very strange.
Yeah.
And she said, and immediately when we started talking to him, he got very, very, very nervous.
Yeah.
Now, they asked if they could search his property. He said no.
All right.
So they said, well, maybe we can ask his wife. So they go back to the store when just she's there. And they're like, look, your husband is a suspect in a case of homosexual homicide, which is what they call it. I'm like, how is that different from regular? It's homicide's homicide, whatever.
Right.
So, and she's like on there going, well, what does that mean? And I'm like,
okay.
Figure it out. Like I said, she seemed like kind of a dim bulb. So
maybe just shocked her. She couldn't process it, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, basically they're telling you not only is your husband gay and he's been cruising the gay bars, but we think that he might have been killing them also. Right. And she's just like, I don't believe you and all this other stuff. And they said, well, can we search the property? And she said no. And still does not tell them about the skull.
Yeah. Ain't that some shit?
That's what made me mad about it. Shit. That's what makes me mad about it. I don't think she knew what he was doing because when they checked her calendar and when they checked the dates that all the men went missing,
she should have put two and two
She was
together.
always out of town. Yeah. Like she was always up at their lake house.
Right.
So she wasn't there. It seemed like whenever she would go out of town with the kids, he'd be like, woohoo, I can go kill somebody.
Yeah, and let the house go to shit.
Yeah, because that was another thing that the guy said. He said the house was really gross and dirty, like there had been no housekeeping done. So I'm assuming that her and the kids would be off at the lake house, and he would just be there for however long, and he would just be a total slob.
Yeah.
And he would bring people home and stuff and kill them. So after this started to happen, like the cops were like, well, they won't let us on the property. We don't have enough evidence to get a search warrant. So then they tried to search the property by air. Like they got in a helicopter and they used like an infrared camera. They said, well, maybe if there are rotting bodies, we can see the heat signatures and stuff. But they didn't really see anything. So they're like, okay, well, we have to get a search warrant. We have to get something. in the meantime, pretty much Herb and Juliana's life starts going to shit. He had actually opened a second Save-A-Lot thrift store, and pretty much immediately after that happened, the business started failing. They were facing bankruptcy. And finally, he was just acting really strange and having a meltdown. And, she, now that she knows that he's been out cruising bars, she files for divorce. So at this stage, now the only person who knew about the skull was Juliana's lawyer. And because of, lawyer-client privilege or whatever, like, he couldn't tell the police. But finally, after the divorce and everything like that, and she starts to think, maybe there is something to this because he's kind of acting crazy and stuff. So she calls her lawyer and says, okay, you can tell police about the skull.
All right.
So they do tell police about the skull, which means that now the police can get a search warrant.
Right.
Though I don't really think they ended up needing one, because I think that Herb went out to the lake house and Juliana told the police, you can come search the property.
Okay.
Police come and search the property and find over 5,000 bone fragments in pretty much two areas. There's like an area that's kind of off to one side of the house. And part of the bones, like some of the bones they found were like actually kind of on the neighbor's property too.
Yeah, putting it on the neighbors.
Yeah, I guess so. And they said most of those bones were intact. There was also directly behind the house was another area, and most of those bones were partially burned and like crushed up.
Right.
Now, they still have no idea how many bodies this is.
Yeah.
It's at least 11.
Right.
But probably more than that.
Yeah. One surviving victim says that he confessed to him that he had killed over 50.
Yeah, between 50 and 60 people.
Damn.
That's what that guy said that had talked to him.
Wow.
I think he said that Herb would say that he didn't really call it murders. He would call it like accidents or mishaps.
Yeah.
Like he was just having autoerotic asphyxiation and oopsie, went a little far there 50 or 60 times.
Right.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, dude.
Right.
So, yeah, so that guy did
He
say
was
that
into
Herb
choking
said
people out.
Yeah. So it could be as many. I think his Wikipedia page says 11 to 20. Some other sources I say could be 27, could be 29. The sad thing about it, though, is that despite all these bone fragments that they found, and like we said on the first part of the show, they still find them.
Right.
Only 4 people have been positively identified.
Wow.
They know who they probably are because they know who all the missing guys are from that area from around that time. But only 4 of them have been positively identified because they found their teeth.
Now, do they really know what it was he was doing with these guys? Was he just strangling them out and then that was it? Or was he strangling them out and then having sex with the dead bodies? Or was he torturing them?
See, I don't know.
Do they know?
Because the thing is, because you actually brought that up because you brought up the thing about the mannequins because you said that's a very Jeffrey Dahmer
Jeffrey
type of
Dahmer
thing.
wanted to make basically sex dolls, living sex dolls.
Right.
Tried to lobotomize kids and pour Drano down in the brains, you know what I mean? Put a hole in their brain and pour Drano in it to try to make a zombie, basically. Yeah. And, somebody that would just be real passive and not do anything, which, boy, that would go to shit quick, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
How do you feed it? And then all of a sudden you can't care for it. So what does it do? Starves to death? That's just a dumb idea. You know? Well, maybe they don't plan to keep them for very long. But then you got this guy here and he's choking them out till they're unconscious. So what? So he can treat them like a doll?
See, this is what, and like I said, this didn't even occur to me, and I haven't even read any of this until you said, because you found it weird that he had the mannequins, like he was super into mannequins.
Yeah, that's gotta be a sexual thing.
And also, yes, he was having sex with these men, a lot of times willingly, and he was doing the autoerotic asphyxiation thing, but like you said, did he do something with their bodies after they were dead? But they wouldn't really know because all of the bodies were all skeletons. Right. And all of the skeletons, most of the skeletons were crushed up.
I think he was doing mannequin-like games with them.
Yeah, it could be.
That's what I think was going on.
It could be. So, I didn't even think of that, but he might have been doing something like that to get off.
Yeah. And the mannequins were like substitutes for the victims. Although, what they picture mostly female mannequins. But I don't know if that's true.
No, because the pictures from it looked about half and half.
About half and half.
It looked like some female ones and some male ones.
I think it was a mannequin fetish partner that just laid there, or you could just pose them. Yeah, something like that. But he is a weird dude. I mean, you're not talking about a normal guy at all. Yeah,
that's what I mean. And to me, it seems like it almost seems like if he killed as many people as they think. I mean, if it really was 50 people, which actually wouldn't shock me. Right. Then he I feel like just strangling them and throwing them in the backyard, I feel like he would have wanted to do more with them than that.
He was a weird dude.
Because he was weird.
Weird dude, yeah.
They said he came off as very off-putting.
Yeah.
And so they've only identified 4 of the victims, Roger Allen Goodlett, Stephen Hale, Richard Hamilton, and Manuel Resendez. So those are the only ones. The other ones are unidentified.
Rest in peace, gentlemen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now, the creepy thing is that as they were searching the property, Herb had taken one of their sons, Eric, up to the lake house for a vacation, unexpectedly. Now, when they were searching the property and they were finding all these bones, Juliana started flipping out. But she's like, he's got our son up there.
Oh, and by the way, I feel bad for his kids.
Oh, yeah.
To be tied in with a weirdo like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not on them. It's not their fault.
And they're never going to live that down. And like I said, their mom, I don't think I haven't seen any interviews with the kids, but they interviewed the mom and several times. She's like, these kids loved their dad. He was a good dad. And, you know.
Well, they only saw one side of him.
They only saw once. Yeah, he had a total double life and they had no idea. So he had the son up at the thing. So Juliana and the cops and her lawyer are like, okay, well, we are going to go up there and get the son before this shit hits the news.
Right.
Because we don't know how he's going to react. Right. You know, to us finding all these bones. The thing is, the cops go up to the lake, which I think was about 100 miles from Fox Hollow Farm, and they get the boy with no problem. Yeah. And I'm guessing Herb didn't think anything about a murder investigation or anything. He just thought, oh, well, Juliana's divorcing me and this is like a legal maneuver or whatever. Yeah. So he didn't seem to think he wasn't suspected. But the stupid thing is that while they were up at the lake getting the kid, they didn't arrest Herb or they didn't have him watched or anything. Yeah,
this is some weird thing through this whole case. It was like the local authorities did not want to arrest him.
Well, the
no
problem...
matter how much stuff they had on the guy, they didn't want to arrest him. It makes me think he had gay dirt on somebody.
He had to have some blackmail shit on somebody because check it out. Well, the shitty thing that happened was that the detective that was working on the case, Mary Wilson, she was in Indianapolis. Yeah. Now, since the crime or the people went missing from Indianapolis, so that was her beat. But since the bodies were found in Hamilton County, which was 20 miles away, that was a different jurisdiction. Yeah. And so she couldn't really tell them what to do. And it seemed like even though they found all these bone fragments on the property, it's like they wouldn't arrest, they wouldn't even have him, like, they wouldn't even put him under surveillance.
No, it's nuts.
And so they go up to the lake, they get the kid, and then they leave. They leave him there by himself.
And here's another thing, man. You have a grown-ass man who's supposed to have normal intelligence just leaving these bodies and these bones around, evidently on the surface of the
or
the
close
earth,
to the surface.
Or close to the surface.
Because people were just stumbling across them.
And evidently not real worried about it.
Because for real, when they first went out there, after Juliana finally told about the skull and everything, you know, the cops were like, well, you know, show us where the skull was found. So she goes out to the woods to show them, and they go out there and he's like, oh, here's more.
Yeah, bones everywhere.
There's teeth. Yeah. There's bone. They're just laying there. Yeah. They were just all over the place. Yeah. They said it was just like, it's just like a cemetery out there. It's all over the place.
Well, actually, worse than a cemetery. They're all contained in boxes. Yeah. These were just out upon
There's just bones scattered all over the place.
He must have been burying them in real shallow. You know, some people say, well, maybe animals got them. When animals, you know, my experience of when animals find another dead animal, they run off with it. Yeah. They scattered around everywhere. Yeah. Like one time, you know, I threw out a dead turkey from a chicken coop one time, and I said, I'll get him later. You know, threw him out in the back of the farm. And went back, I forgot to get him. Went back about 6 hours later and he was gone. Just gone. And and I'd been all over that property after that and never saw a trace of that turkey. Yeah. Not even a feather. So, you know, the animals take them. I think if it was all due to animals digging them up, those bodies would have been found by other people because they would have ended up on other people's property. I think he kind of just left them on the surface, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe he did. I mean, he couldn't have left them on the surface because his kids played out in the woods.
Maybe he burned them first.
I think because some of the bones...
just threw the bones up on the surface, or he had them decomposing in a certain spot, and then once they were all rotten, taking the bones and just throwing them out.
I feel like a lot of them were crushed up because, like, a lot of the pieces that they found were very small. You know, they did find bigger portions later on. Like,
Makes me think he had some kind of compost pile going on somewhere.
Yeah, he probably did.
And it must have been in a secure location.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere in that house. Maybe there was something like a little concrete chamber where, you don't know, maybe where water pipes could be, and you could stash some bodies there for the few months that you need to get them to decompose out. And, the smell escapes out from, some vent somewhere else. Something that he found in the house where he could stash a body and let it rot. Yeah. That's what I think happened. And then he's taking the bone, and then he's cleaning it out, taking the bones out of there and just throwing them in the woods. Maybe. That's just my hypothesis. I haven't been to the area. Yeah. But I just find it strange that if they were that close to the surface, that the animals didn't get them and scatter them around everywhere.
That's what I would think. And really, if you look, because I saw like a drone picture of the property from the air, and it didn't really look like the bones were that far from the house.
Yeah, no.
And I mean, the kids and shit
just like walking distance. Yeah, no, just like walking distance.
Because, I mean, evidently, if he killed them in the pool, he would just drag them out of the sliding glass door that's there in the pool area and would presumably just take them and throw them out the back. But I don't know if that's what he did or not, or if, like you said, he had some place that he stashed them in the house.
There had to have been some kind of service crawl space somewhere.
Because, whenever he did it, whenever he killed somebody, like I said, Juliana and the kids were never there. Because every single time in her diary that her and the kids were on vacation up at the lake house, that was when the men would go missing. So he would wait till they were gone. And sometimes they were gone for a while, I would presume, for several days or maybe weeks or whatever. So he could have been doing God knows what. They don't know what he was doing in there.
I got a weird feeling that there was some kind of little service crawl space somewhere, maybe not in the house, but, on that compound. Place where he could let them decompose for a little while until they didn't weigh very much, and just took the bones and just threw them out in the yard and cleared that space out again for the next victims. You might have 2 or 3 of them in there rotting at the same time. Yeah. And it's someplace where you could keep them for 4 or 5 months or something, Yeah. Something like that.
But so anyway, the dumbass cops, they pick up the kid is fine. He gives him up with no problem. But then they leave Herb at the lake house by himself. Now, when they go back up there later on, like when they finally are like, oh, maybe we should arrest this guy since there's fucking 5,000 bones in his yard. Right, yeah. They go back to the lake house and of course he's gone. Yeah. Now they don't know where he is for 8 days. Yeah. Nobody knows where he is. Yeah. And then finally on July 3rd, 1996, they find his dead body in Canada in a park. Some sources say he's in the car. Some sources say he's next to the car. He shot himself in the head. Yeah. He left a 3-page suicide note, by all accounts very rambling. He apologized for his failing marriage, his failing business, said how much he loved his children, ended it with a very weird phrase. He said, "I'm going to eat a peanut butter sandwich and go to sleep." Okay. Maybe. Mentions nothing about the murders, nothing about the bones, nothing. Ugh. Yeah. What an asshole.
Yeah. Didn't confess.
Didn't confess nothing. Well, probably because he did not mention it.
It's probably because it wasn't a big deal to him,
Maybe not.
Yeah, not a big deal to him. Because people didn't matter to him.
Yeah. The weird thing about it is that, like I said, now some sources say it doesn't matter if he was found in the car or outside of the car. It said he shot himself in the forehead, which is kind of hard to do. But
no, you can hold it like that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But the weird thing about it is that on the stupid Ghost Adventure show that they did about this. Yeah. Fucking Zach goes and talks to Virgil Vandegrift, the private investigator who worked on the case. Now, Vandegrift says that when they found Herb Baumeister's body in the park, that Herb looked like he had posed himself ritualistically before he killed himself. Like on the reenactment, they showed him lying on the ground, like almost in a Christ kind of pose with like dead birds around him. Yeah. But I have seen no other source that said that, because I don't know if the Ghost Adventures people told Virgil to say that, so then Zach could go, oh, well, maybe, Herb did some ritual so his spirit would haunt the earth or whatever, because that's exactly, of course, what Zach said afterward. But I have never seen any other thing refer to his death being unusual in any way. It just looked like a straight up suicide. He just shot himself in the head in his car or outside of his car. Yeah, so I don't know if they told Virgil to say that, because I didn't see that detail anywhere else except on that show.
That's Zach's game, man.
So he shot himself and, good riddance. Yeah. But it's kind of sucks for the victims' families because they have no idea. They have no idea what happened to their sons, their brothers, They will never know because the dude's dead. Yeah. And the shitty thing, too, is that later on, when they were trying to tie together, because remember I mentioned the I-70 murders, like all the bodies that have been found alongside the interstate, turned out that Herb probably did those too because Juliana was like, yeah, he used to go to Columbus, Ohio on business all the time. And he used to drive that road all the time. And the interesting thing was that those murders stopped as soon as he bought Fox Hollow Farm.
Yeah.
Because now he had room right by his house to throw the bodies instead of having to dump them off on the side of the interstate.
Fucking Herb.
Fucking Herb.
Fucking Herb.
So, like I said, Wikipedia is like, they know he killed at least 11.
Yeah.
Okay? They found at least 11 distinct bodies on his property, but it could be as many as 60.
Damn.
I've seen between 11 and 20. I've seen some say 27, some say 29. I don't think they will ever know. Only 4 of them have been identified. And like I said, I'm sure that his wife did not know, and I feel bad for her.
Yeah.
But in a way, they interviewed some of the victims' families on this particular documentary I saw, the Bill Curtis one. One of the victims' sisters, I believe, she was like, that bitch should have known. I mean, she didn't say it like that, but she's like, she must have known about it and stuff. I can see how she maybe didn't know because they were apart a lot.
I think she was in denial. She suspected something going on.
Maybe she suspected. I don't know. Now, one thing that I can get mad at her about is not telling the cops about that skull, because if she had told... Now, 2 men disappeared after she found that skull.
Right.
And if she had found that and reported it, then those people might still be alive.
Yeah.
And they had one of the victim's mothers on there. And, you know, once the skull was found and Juliana told Herb, hey, where'd the skull come from? He's like, oh, it was just my dad's skull. And then the skull disappeared. So nobody knows what he did with it.
He crushed that up and got rid of it.
Right. And so, like, one of the victim's mothers was like, you know, if she had turned that skull in, she's like, that could have been my son. And now I will never know.
Yep.
And that is just really, really upsetting. So I can get up her ass about that. It's like, I'm not going to blame her for his shit. I'm sure she didn't know. But really, you find a skull in your backyard, please report that shit. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like she could have saved those 2 people. Maybe that would have happened anyway. Maybe they would have died anyway. But, you know, maybe not. Maybe those people wouldn't be dead if she had reported it. So I'm just saying. So yeah, that's the Fox Hollow Farm case. Went a little bit long, but you know, it's kind of a lot of detail to go into. So I hope you guys kind of enjoyed this supersized paranormal / true crime episode.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff on this one, you know.
On
there's YouTube.
Tons of
guys doing their own little ghost investigations, so you can have hours of enjoyment tripping out on.
And like
Fox
I said,
Hollow.
there's at least 2 or 3. No, actually, more like 4 or 5 different crime documentaries, like that were on Discovery or Investigation.
Yeah, there's a good chance this could be a haunted house. I would live the fuck out of that haunted house, though. I would live in that.
Beautiful house.
Hell yeah.
It's really beautiful. I mean, you can see Ghost Adventures on their website. They actually took a bunch of pictures of the interior and exterior. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Okay.
All right, so that'll do it for episode 82. Remember to, if you like the show, to like, share, support on all your social media. If you'd like to financially support the show, that would be very nice. You can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/13o'clock, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Also, check out our Zazzle store at zazzle.com/13o'clock. We have t-shirts and a tote bag there for your enjoyment. Also, check out our latest movie review, which was The Changeling, and we will have more to come on this upcoming Friday. Also, remember to check out my book, The Faceless Villain, if you haven't already. Volume 1 is out, and I'm still working on Volume 2. Should be out sometime before summer or early summer, so keep an eye out for that. And until next time, bye.